you can hear us okay. Matt's coming live from Costa Rica, and we are up on the river. Still in winter. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Solar Man. Cool. I'm going to hit record and get this bad boy fired up. Let me shut down. Telegram is annoying me. Getting constantly pinged. It's like, are you on Telegram, Matt?
I am. Yeah, sort of.
Okay.
Just a little bit. Barely. I try to avoid. I'm trying to avoid all the new platforms like Clubhouse and everything. Although Telegram makes sense as far as like a decentralized or at least not Facebook owned platform.
Yeah. That's funny, dude. I'm trying to do the same thing, and I got invited like 4 people yesterday, including like Dr. Batar and to the Clubhouse thing. And so I was like, okay, I'll join this stupid Clubhouse thing. So
can't we just all hang out in person, please? Like, why does everyone need to start having clubhouses now? Like,
I know, it's
on top of Instagram and Facebook. Like, could we please all just like plan a trip and hang out together?
I know. It's so ridiculous. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and hit record, and we will fire up this bad boy.
Let's do it.
Hey guys, welcome back for another episode of AlphaCast. I'm Mike Winter, and I'm here as always with Dr. Bear Paul Lando, coming from you live up here on the Smith River in the beautiful state of Jefferson, where we're getting pelted with hail yesterday at the farm. And then today it's gorgeous blue skies, going to hit the 60s. It's been an interesting winter, not too harsh, but also we've had some interesting weather. But overall, Bear, I would say that winter is finally kind of showing its last legs here. And we're excited for spring and planting and all that comes with that. So we have Anarchapulco going on this week. We've got a virtual booth at. Bear spoke on Tuesday on the Health and Wellness Day, and it was received quite well there. It was really cool, Bear. You're getting introduced by our someone I love, Ben Swan. And watching that whole day go by with like Andrew Kaufman talking and some other friends, Beth Martins, that was great. It's still going on right now. You guys can catch it at anarchapulco.com. And then, of course, we hope to be there in person next year and surf and hit the good weather down there. But so Anarchapulco is going. And then, of course, we have Reunion Summit in 9 days now. I put my heart and soul into that. reunionsummit.com/watch. Bear Lando's featured, including all of our friends. It's a massive, massive summit. And it's all about community and affecting change and really pushing the new world that we all want to see into reality. So check that out. That's reunionsummit.com/watch. And for those new to the podcast, if you want to know more about Alfa Vedic, go to alfavedic.com. Today, we are super pumped because we have Matt Maruca from Raw Optics on the show. I'm really looking forward to this one because I've been diving deeper into the science of natural light and sun. And of course, we talk about the more esoteric, etheric ideas of what the sun is and what light is and the informational fields behind it and what the real science is. And so we get to dive deep with Matt, who's done a ton of research himself, so much that he has his own line of glasses, which I'm actually wearing. I wear blue blocking glasses because as a web developer, crypto developer, etc., I'm in front of, you can't see it, but I've got 3 massive screens in front of me right here. And so I wear it because I am, unfortunately, in front of screens a lot. And it's something I have to do, and Matt can explain more on the show why that's important. But even during the show, I wear it because I am exposed so much to these screens. So that being said, Matt Maruca is the founder and CEO of Raw Optical. As a child, Matt struggled constantly with debilitating headaches, allergies, and gut issues. He spent years trying Western medical drugs, Eastern diets and herbs, and modern diets and supplements to no avail. But everything changed when he learned about the role of mitochondria in producing energy and maintaining health in the body. Matt's research led to the understanding that all chronic diseases manifest when mitochondria are severely damaged and at the root of his own health issues. This led to the realization of why his own mitochondria had become compromised. In Matt's own words, mitochondria are electromagnetic, quote unquote, in nature, which means that their ability to process food and make energy is controlled by light. Every night, a hormone called melatonin helps to repair our mitochondria while we sleep. The problem was I was sabotaging myself with my late night TV, phone, and computer use, destroying my melatonin levels and my mitochondria. The blue light frequencies and devices mimicked the sun and tricked my brain into thinking it was daytime and that I didn't need to sleep. I had to find a way to reset my circadian rhythm so my mitochondria could get the rest and repair needed. This would become the origins of raw optics. So today we're going to dive into light. We're also going to touch on Matt's journey with his own company, which something Bear and I talk about a lot is the need for people to really embrace entrepreneurship and go out and find what your passion is, your vocation, and take charge of your own business. And we're really excited about all new forms of commerce that are coming out and new ways that we can support each other as a community with our own imperatives and our own businesses. So welcome, Matt. Welcome, Bear. Lando, Dr. Lando, how are you today, sir?
Doing great. Spring's definitely here. It's sunny out and we got a work crew going on. We're clearing the forest for the upcoming planting. We're making plans for building our new lab. I got a contractor coming out today. So all things are going. Hey, Matt, really a joy to have you here. And good to see you're soaking up the sunshine in Costa Rica there. Wish I was there with you. It's a favorite surf destination. So good to have you here, my friend. And, there's so many things we could talk about today, not in the least is just, I don't want to keep saying at your age, but, you do represent a different demographic. And most of the folks in that category sort of, are waiting for jobs and, welfare checks and everything else. And meanwhile, you educated yourself first based on health challenges you had. You got to the bottom of them on your own, figured it out, and then also developed a company behind it. So that's just an incredible story. And then also really got in with the science, not just biological, but just what really represents light. And as Mike already said, it's not just incandescence. It's really intelligent substance with informational fields, which is why we don't get the effects from artificial light that we get from the sun. And so, Matt, take it away. We'll go whatever direction you want to take it. And good to have you here, buddy.
Hey, and Matt, you're muted right now, as I was too. It's good. We're having a moment of silence. There we go.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Yes, Matt. Welcome.
You're there.
Bunky, great. So I was just saying I'm very grateful to be on the show. So thank you guys so much to have an opportunity to speak with you guys and to have, even just the few minutes we spoke before to hear some of your wisdom about life and traveling. So very, very best that I can to heal myself and become the best person that I can within this lifetime, as well as to help others to discover their best selves. So that's really the mission that ultimately drives me, is that I want to be the best that I can be. And I want to be able to share what I learn along that journey with as many people as I can, because from my experience and people I know, it seems like so many people live in a really challenging life. Like most people, just life isn't easy. It's really, really hard all the time, or a lot of the time. And I lived there for a long time, and still often, find myself falling back into those patterns of thought and old emotions and so on. And so my goal is, again, just to really break free of that, and then hopefully be able to be a light for others. And I think a lot of the things I've learned so far in the journey have been tremendously, I know they've been tremendously beneficial to me, and they've been beneficial to other people who I've been able to share these things with. So I just want to be able to share what I've learned up to this point and always be the student and keep learning. That's sort of my my why and how I operate.
Yeah, and you're living proof that things can be done differently. We have a good number of people these days that get up every day, do what they hate the most, but they do it for a paycheck. They go to work and have a supervisor that tells them what to do and how to do it. And of course, everybody's just leading these lives of quiet desperation, I think, because they don't think there's any alternative. But what you found is there not only are there alternatives, but to exercise those options, you have to stick your neck out a bit. You have to take some risk. But then, Mike and I have done the same thing in our lives. When you do take those risks, not only do you get rewarded, but you align yourself with forces that otherwise would not be available to you. And then that's when the magic really happens. So good for you. And I think what's happening with a lot more people going forward as systems fail and people realize that, no, this isn't what I signed on for. This isn't what I'm really here just to pick up a paycheck. People are starting to take those risks and find out that, wow, life really is an adventure again. So that's an amazing story you've got there, Matt.
Yeah, thank you. I definitely feel that way. So my background, that introduction was pretty suitable, but as a more extended version, I'll share a bit about my background and sort of how I got into this, for my voice. When I was about, as long as I can remember, actually, I've had some sort of health challenges. So gut issues like gas and bloating and gastric distress, and just discomfort when I would eat foods, and I didn't really know what triggered it and what affected it. And as well, I had really strong pollen allergies and all sorts of seasonal allergies throughout, as young as I can remember, about like age 8. So 3rd grade in elementary school, I was just having these horrible congestions and just pressure headaches, and just the whole thing was kind of not fun at all, to say the least. And then as I went into high impeding my ability to function as a human in school, and as just a person who wanted to be happy and enjoying life. And now that I've learned about the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza, earlier on, I started to blame all these concepts, or these challenges, I should say, on environmental things and diet. And after learning, and not just Dr. Joe Dispenza, but as a representation and sort of a gateway to the broader world of energy and spirituality, something that I've been very interested in the last few years, but only diving deep in the last, 6 months or so. I have a hunch that these health challenges maybe had more to do with emotional traumas and challenges from my very young age, like 2, 3, when my parents were fighting a lot and having a divorce, and sort of, because my issues are in my second center, my gut and all that, and my immune system. And that's the center related to security, stability, family, and so on. So it's an interesting parallel, not to say that it's for certain. But anyhow, that's sort of like my more current theories and understanding of my challenges. But at the time, I had no idea of anything really. So other than that, I was young and just having these challenges. I started getting breakouts of acne all over my skin, and just as many teenagers do, but I really felt that that wasn't supposed to happen. And that vanity was what triggered me to want to improve myself. I had done different things for my health issues, but I didn't think that those could be that we just couldn't change these things, that they're genetic and you can't change them. So anyhow, when I started reading about how to heal my skin, I learned about diets like the Paleolithic diet as a sort of introductory, thing I came across on the internet. And the concept seemed really sound to me. It really clicked with me to eat a more natural diet that wasn't full of, pesticides and processed foods and all that stuff. And when I did that, just by cutting out all of this refined junk food that I was eating as the base of my diet, I just felt so much better, as you might expect, that it was literally like there was a big haze lifted off of my eyes to the fact that I might actually be able to affect my body through things I could do. And as soon as as a 13, 14-year-old who was doing this Google searching and trying to figure this all out, as soon as that spark was sort of lit inside of me, it has never been able to be unlit since, because once you just can't not know anymore on anything of that level. And so it just progressed and evolved since then. I got really deep into dieting, trying to heal my challenges using diet, and made good progress in the beginning, but then really felt like I hit a spot where I couldn't advance. No matter how much stricter I went, how many, I went on an autoimmune protocol, paleo diet to remove all allergens, and gut healing diets with lots of bone broth and collagen and healing foods and that whole kind of thing. And just a lot of extreme dieting, as I would call it. And as a 14, 15-year-old at this time, it became really hard for me, like thinking that I could solve my issues if only I was a little bit more strict and rigid with myself. And it ended up sort of like in a state of, I ended up in a state of like an eating disorder and sort of like self-loathing, eating disorder, yo-yo dieting cycle that was really challenging for me at that age, especially. And then, I was super open to any information I could possibly come across. And I came across the work of a neurosurgeon blogger who was sort of commingling in the paleo diet world named Dr. Jack Kruse, who was sharing some really, really cool information that really caught my ears about how basically diet and exercise are a good start to improve health, but that basically our biology is significantly more complex according to the literature and even the Western research, the most advanced and deep Western research that's available, which is what he was focusing on. And that basically that there's so many more factors influencing our body than just food and exercise and supplementation, for example, that to try to reduce our system to that level of complexity and say that you could heal a lot of modern diseases, which may or may not be related to diet, with diet alone, is a bit reductionist and simplistic, almost as reductionist and simplistic as the Western symptom drug model that these diets and supplement regimens and so on actually seek to oppose or overcome. That their level of thinking is in the similar line of thinking because of, again, being somewhat reductionistic. And this was super fascinating to me. Sort of the main tenets that interest me were the concept of, of consuming greater quantities of seafood, because seafood contains a large amount of the omega-3 DHA, which is useful or used for the evolution of the human brain from an ape into a human. And so we have a huge demand for DHA in our brain, but we don't have a very strong ability to produce it ourselves, which implies that it came from an external source in our environment, an environmental source during evolution at some point. And there's archaeological evidence to support that humans transitioned to, or apes transitioned to humans, that coincided with consumption of a lot of shellfish on in coastal regions of Africa, like easy to access shellfish that didn't involve making hooks and lines. That's not shellfish, just, how can I say, just pure shellfish that you can crack open and smash with a rock, as opposed to actually needing some evolved brain to go out and fish for real fish. So anyhow, this was something that fascinated me. And as I dug deeper and learned more about the work that Dr. Cruz was sharing, I was learning about these different researchers talking about these different theories. And what started to interest me the most was this focus on light, and basically how at the core, even of all of our food, it's electrons that are excited by light energy that we take into our body. And the reason they're able to give us energy is because they've been excited by sunlight, as opposed to, like, for example, eating dirt or something that's inorganic matter. So organic matter's been excited by sunlight. So that's what food really is. It's like crystallized sunlight. And even at a deeper level, learning that our bodies are fundamentally light-based. I read a bunch of books and textbooks of all sorts of different researchers over the past 100 years and more, who basically studied our body and found that it isn't just a sack of chemicals that's having all these chemical reactions occurring. We're actually significantly more complex, and effectively our bodies are essentially, they're electromagnetic in origin. You know, we are these beings of energy and of light. And again, like someone such as Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about, the research is very clear that in our life, it is the field, our energy field, that actually directs and informs and instructs matter in our body, as opposed to matter creating the field. In other words, one of the books you guys may be familiar with, The Body Electric, by a gentleman named Robert O. Becker, studied and basically found that there's no explanation in traditional biochemistry and biology for how cells in the body know which cell to become, because every cell has the same DNA, the same sets of DNA. And yet up here we have a brain, and down below we have our feet, and in between we have our kidneys and our liver and all of our organs and our blood and our veins and our capillaries. And all of these things all the cells have the same exact genetic code. So he was also trying to understand how this could be the case, as well as why certain animals can regenerate entire limbs and humans can't. And he basically, after studying a wide variety of things, he determined that there's this previously really unknown and undocumented electrical system that makes up the body, and that this electrical system, and basically it's an electromagnetic field, is basically the governor of the function of the entire body. And this is, in my evaluation, directly related to the seven Hindu traditions. And so, you know, these are things that people in past societies were able to become aware of. But this was all the stuff I was learning about that just completely opened my mind to a much greater possibility of healing that I could achieve myself. And so I started this protocol that went a lot deeper than just the food I was eating. And it involved a lot of different things, like basically the main thing was getting out in the sun and mitigating my exposure to artificial light, but also mitigating my exposure to man-made electromagnetic radiation like Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, cell towers, and getting more connected to the earth, like by going out and being in nature and grounding and being barefoot and swimming in cold bodies of water, or just any natural body of water, and, you know, eating naturally a healthy diet. But the focus wasn't so much on the food as it was, in this case, on the environment and the bioenergetics. And that was really what got me into the research on light and how it affects the body. And to sort of summarize that, the best analogy for understanding at a basic level the difference between a focus on food for health as opposed to a focus on our overall engines and our field even would be thinking about a car, for example, it's been used a lot and it's been worn out and hasn't been taken to a mechanic, and all of the spark plugs are worn out, or a bunch of the spark plugs are worn out. The car wouldn't be able to run, essentially. You know, maybe it could start, maybe it'll be misfiring, maybe it'll move, but it won't move quickly. Maybe it won't start at all. And for someone to take that car to the gas station and try to would not be able to solve the issue of the broken and worn out spark plugs. And in the same way that premium fuel versus regular fuel can't fix broken, worn out spark plugs in a car's engine, when our body's engines, our cellular engines called mitochondria, have become damaged and dysfunctional because of our lifestyle and not going to our mechanic, then trying to put in premium fuel like clean, high quality food and even supplementation like fuel additives can't fix the spark plugs in the engine. It's a different system, effectively, the fuel and the engine. One is going in, the other is actually processing and managing. And what controls the engine in our body, the engines really, because there's actually hundreds of trillions of them, but it's our circadian biology and it's energy. So it's the electromagnetic energy coming, like the information we speak about, coming from the sun, coming from even celestial bodies like the moon and the stars, although that's a little bit further out there and not my personal area of expertise, but these things certainly have an effect on our bodies. But particularly the sun, being the closest star and the giver of life on earth, or one of the main givers of life on earth, has a huge impact on our biology. And our cells are literally, they have a need, a necessity to prepare for the changing environment every day in order to be able to adapt and evolve. And one of the most profound changes is that we have sunlight throughout the day and then we have darkness at night. So our cells actually adjust, and we use nighttime as a time to repair as humans, and we use daytime as a time to be active and do all sorts of other things, like mainly scavenging for nutrition and nutrients from the environment and reproduction and so on. And so we need to be, connected to that to function the way we're designed. And if we're connected to the indoor lifestyle, or I should say disconnected from our natural lifestyle, but entirely indoors on screens, artificial light sources, and all of these types of things like computers and Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and cell signals, then not only is our circadian rhythm off in our brain and then therefore the rest of our organs, but our mitochondria, our cellular engines, can't produce energy correctly at all. And so we start to see all sorts of dysfunction occurring throughout the cells. And there's a lot more research behind all of this that we can get into, but that's sort of the higher level overview of, you can see my progression. It just expanded my horizons so much that I couldn't go back to business as usual in the focus on just diet and exercise alone. And then, in the years since then, that was when I was 15, 16, 17, when I was really researching and focusing a ton on light for my own health. I started my business to be able to support myself and travel, which are, of course, are the blue light blocking glasses that Mike mentioned and is wearing right now. The reason I'm not wearing them is because I'm out in basically the sun. I'm in the shade, but I'm getting the full spectrum of natural light, including near infrared, which is a key component that's blocked, generally speaking, when we're indoors behind windows. And so because I'm getting the near infrared, I'm basically protected from any harmful light coming off the computer here.
Sorry guys, Matt's freezing a little bit.
Based on the circles I was running in.
A little bit.
Wait, can you hear
Matt,
me okay now?
Yeah. You're breaking up a little bit, but back up to the infrared light and importance of that, because that's something I do want to touch on. And actually, dude, you're hitting it on so many levels right now. Like,
I'm glad.
I want to kind of break down some of this, and I'm sure Bear wants to touch on a ton of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
First and foremost, I must say mad props to you at 14, 15, taking your health into your own hands, not looking to authority. I don't know if you kind of went down that line of like going to allopaths or going to officialdom to figure out what's going on with you, but that's fantastic that you said, I got to figure out, this is not normal. Like what I'm dealing with my health doesn't seem natural. Doesn't seem like how this body is here on this planet to experience life in this way. Something's malfunctioning. So let me get on good old Google and figure out what the heck's going on. And so at that early of an age shows to me just how tapped in you are as a soul, as a light being, for you to take responsibility for yourself and know that you are sovereign in that, hey, I got to figure this out. That right there is like most the battle. people tend to give their authority away and look towards authority figures. Hey, fix me, help me, doc, what's wrong with me? So first and foremost, mad props to you on that, because that is really cool. And then your journey going from, and this is, Bear and I see this with our community because we're constantly being hit up about diet and stuff. And this is something that we did a whole talk on veganism, a whole alpha cast on veganism versus paleo. And in the end, our message is, hey guys, it's just food. It's particles. It's still the constituents of the materialism. And as long as your consciousness is focused on that, you're still on the same wheel, whether you're paleo, whether you're vegan. And now there are different elements to that. And I'll let Bear talk to that in terms of spirituality. We know veganism allows for a kind of a less dense form of reality, and that can allow for opening up the third eye, and that works with your glandular system, and it's very advanced. However, the core of what I love about your journey is that you went away from that. You said, okay, diet's not really working. Like, I'm being really hardcore with these diets. What is going on here? That it seems like I'm abusing myself. What's deeper? And then it's like the classic observation of science. You look outside, like right now I'm looking outside. What do I see? Light, the sun. What's the predominant force that's affecting everything? It's connecting everything. Is the sun, is light. So that's amazing that you kind of, you made that evolution towards that understanding at that early age, at like 16, 17. That's incredible, bro. At 16, 17, I was worried about, traditional things in high school that kids worry about. Like, does this girl like me? Am I going to make the basketball team? So props to you, brother. Now to backtrack, and I'll let Bear step in here. I want to get deep into light, because we've had some amazing guests on in the past and we've gone into light a lot. And there's some exciting new science that is actually coming out of universities that's talking about mitochondria, and that in fact humans may be more closer to plants than we thought. And that we might be what's the term here? I'm looking up, actually, this is an amazing book. Sayer G, a homie of ours, Regenerate, has some really new exciting science. I don't know if you've read this book, Matt, or not, but there's really exciting new developments with this idea that humans might be what's called a photoheterotroph, which means we're a hybrid between a traditional autotroph, which would be a plant, which just basically says plants create their own food through the sun, which we know how that process works, of course, and how they convert light through the chemical process of chlorophyll to create the carbohydrates and the sugars and everything that animals eat and humans eat. But also we're finding that they're heterotrophs are traditionally those animals that require that, right? They require the conversion of light into plant matter so that we can have that energy, which you so perfectly said was crystallized form of light, which is how we understand it. But we can go beyond that and start to see that actually our mitochondria has the ability to convert that energy to ATP without the need of that necessarily. And this is something that Bear and I can explain on higher kind of forms of physics with waveform physics and stuff. So this is the kind of stuff that we like to get into AlphaCast, because we like to push the limits of what people are talking about. So I'd love to go into that. And if you're aware of these newer studies, and then to touch upon these different aspects of light, the quality of light, the quality of natural light, across the spectrum, and how that engages with not only our physiology, but our consciousness. So I know that's kind of a number of things there. So let's get into it. Bear, Lando, any comments on stuff I just said?
Yeah, a ton of comments, but I'd rather hear Matt maybe just respond to everything you threw out there. So Matt, if you want to go for it, do it.
And you're muted, brother.
It seems, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
It seems with enough inactivity, my microphone continues to turn itself off. I'm not quite sure why that would be, but does the sound good this way?
Yeah, you're good.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. Yeah, because I have a studio mic, but if it's going to keep cutting out, then that's not going to be very helpful, even if it sounds a little better. So, sound good? Yes, still?
Yeah, you're good, brother.
Fantastic. Awesome. So basically, yes, I'm familiar with these concepts. It's something that I've seen and heard of and read about many times now. And thankfully, people send me a lot of articles when they come out now, just because people are like, oh my gosh, did you see this thing? And a lot of the time, I don't even have to dig very far because people just send me the cool stuff that's coming out, which I appreciate. But yes, this has been something that has come up many times in my own studies, that we can essentially photosynthesize based on the evidence available. There's different theories and mechanisms of how this exactly works, and I couldn't say that any of them are, in my view, fully 100% accurate, because I think there just needs to be more and more research done. But they all seem to be pretty directionally accurate. And so like the two main ones, that come to mind, one is what you mentioned, that when we take red and near infrared light into our mitochondria can basically make ATP free of charge, just basically free light energy, spinning our ATPase and then allowing us to make ATP, which can power our cells and do all sorts of really cool things. That's one. Another is that, with the work of a guy like Dr. Gerald Pollack on the fourth phase of water up in the Pacific Northwest as well. I wonder if you guys maybe have interviewed him. He'd be a really great guest.
He's on the list. He for yes, we get asked about him once a month. Yes, very familiar with his research, by the way.
Amazing. Yeah, and based on his work, in addition to our mitochondria receiving light energy and being able to make ATP, our cellular water is able to absorb light energy, especially infrared, and that causes the water to become structured in the basically what he calls the fourth phase of water, also called the exclusion zone, because when they first saw it, it was excluding anything because it was structured, and even tiny anything as small as a single proton couldn't even enter this little structured zone of water. And it only occurs, this structured water, when the water is up against any sort of hydrophilic or water-loving surface and in the presence of near-infrared light. And then ultraviolet light can actually significantly further expand this structured zone. So it makes a lot of sense understanding how water works at a base level, and then knowing, based on what I've studied, that our body benefits tremendously from infrared light, like in the case of saunas and red light therapy and so on. And then also knowing that our body benefits tremendously from strong ultraviolet light as well, within reason, if we don't overdose and harm our skin and so on. So yes, that's sort of a number two, is that we're basically batteries for light energy as an entire organism. And again, this is something that's not yet quantified or quantified. It's quantifiable for sure, but it hasn't quite been quantified based on what I've read and understood. Maybe it has in some, hidden, less well-known research, but this is the kind of stuff that I really want to keep trying to uncover and understand, because there's all these researchers who have studied these things for decades, and they may even be dead now, but they discover these things and their work was just kind of never appreciated. So those are the types of people who I really hope to, continue to learn about and dig up. And then additionally, there's a researcher out of Mexico City named, I believe it's Gabriel or Arturo Solis Herrera. And he has a book called Melanin, the Master Molecule, about photosynthesis and human photosynthesis, and basically describes that we use melanin with light energy to split water and then release a ton of free electrons, which is also very similar to Gerald Pollack's model in the fourth phase of water, because basically, in both of them, the water molecule is being split just like in photosynthesis, and that's releasing electrons and energy that our cells can basically use. So it seems that they're both on the same, in fact, they're all on the same track. And based on other things I've read, I would further this, because I see that our body is entirely electromagnetic. And so that actually, I would go as far as saying that every reaction and every chemical in the body is ultimately responsive and directed by light and energy. And although I said I would go as far as saying it's really not that far out there, because, from several different angles, based on the work we spoke about with Dr. Becker, we know that matter itself and molecules themselves really can't do anything unless they're animated or moved by energy. So in other words, if we didn't have any energy, according to Isaac Newton, we would be inanimate. We wouldn't be able to move. We would be as dead as a rock, right? But we're very animate, and there's lots of things happening in our body, which means we have lots of energy occurring in our cells. And that energy is what's governing the function of the 100,000 biochemical reactions per second per cell, which is the, only the approximation of what's happening. But that's a lot of things happening that all need to be controlled and governed. And light and energy there's enough wavelengths of light that could basically govern every single process, in the body. So that's really one angle to look at it, that every single biomolecule and every single reaction is governed by certain wavelengths of light. Another way to look at it, and very similarly, is that every single atom, it's known, every single atom has certain absorption spectra of light. Every single atom is based on a nucleus, which has protons and neutrons, and then electrons that orbit around the nucleus, which basically make it an atom, the fundamental unit of matter as physicists currently understand it. And basically electrons, because they're electromagnetic, they interact with different wavelengths of light depending on the characteristics of that particular atom. So it follows that in research as well, in the studies, this is very clear in physics. No, I don't think any physicist even would debate this, but basically molecules that are made of atoms also have specific and unique absorption and re-emission spectra of light. And then if you go from regular molecules to biomolecules that build up life, every single biomolecule, every single molecule in our living organism is also responsive to light energy, just as its constituent parts are. And when you go out in the sun, in the solar spectrum, we're literally exposed to a very broad array of light that interacts with all of these, basically all of the matter in our body. But where I would go is I would go one step further and basically say that it isn't that we just are the sack of chemicals that happen to just appear on Earth randomly and magically, and then we happen to be able to go out and receive the benefits of the sun. I would put it the other way, that actually the energy of the sun, that is the energy that's dominantly present on Earth, is what is actually powering, animating, and driving the evolution of all of the things in our body that we can currently observe respond to that light. In other words, the sun gave us life and drove our evolution forward in a large number of ways. And so the things we see occurring in our body are sort of the children of the light of the sun. And so the reason that this subject that I'm very passionate about and interested in is so relevant today is because we've literally moved to an indoor lifestyle. So it's basically like we're like a phone that's never getting connected to its charger anymore. So we're just inside. And because we are able to run on energy sources separate from sunlight, like food, which is meant to be sort of a supplement and additional to light, that we are able to survive in an indoor lifestyle. But I would definitely assert, and I do regularly, that we are designed to be functioning first on solar light energy and secondly on food. And then by going inside, we are functioning as effectively zombies, like really, and I'm not exaggerating that, we are really functioning as like sleep, tired, stressed, third eye shut zombies that are so different from what even our Native American and native tribal ancestors would have functioned as far as their levels of consciousness and openness and awareness. And I think when we look at, people ask questions like, how did the Egyptians build the pyramids? And how did humans do all sorts of other tremendously amazing things and have all sorts of amazing abilities? It actually isn't that far-fetched when we just look at like how detrimental our life is to our normal physiological functioning. Now, of course, there's different theories like aliens and other sorts of entities and forces that are involved with the pyramids and all sorts of other things that I'm not anywhere near an expert on, but I wouldn't make any claims about that particular case. I know people have feelings about that a lot of the time, but you get what I'm saying. Like, humans have tremendous power as individuals, and I think we're just barely scratching the surface. Even the people in our society who are waking up, I think are scratching the surface of what's really possible. There are definitely few who are really doing it, like, Sadhguru and other gurus in India and other common people who have just tapped into higher levels of consciousness. And so that's really, for me, where this is all going. That's a bit of a long-winded answer to your question about humans being connected to light energy. But I do, the research, beyond my own feelings, the research is thoroughly there to support that we are beings of light at every level.
Yeah, well said. I think the important takeaway is there's a lot to discuss in between here, and we cover a lot of that, in our work. But the important thing is we're all agreeing that what we're doing here on the ground isn't working. And you in your own life have, put your own experience to test and find out, to find out what actually works. And this isn't at all contradicting anybody or yourself or anything you said, because they're all extremely valid points. I just think we get a little schizophrenic, with some of the old concepts of quantifiable science, because that's one half of the equation. As we always say, on this show, is there's two sides to the equation. The other side is the qualitative, and science does not only not recognize that, and I use the term science loosely, but it also has not tapped into how to measure that in a similar fashion as we think of the way we measure quantifiable things. And you mentioned Egypt, for instance. In Egypt, they understood, at the height of their civilization, very distinctly how, we aren't particles at all. That never existed. They understood the simulation aspects of our entire existence, and that what we talk about as far as protons, neutrons, atoms, really don't exist. And in fact, they're, kind of fractal step downs through the electronic planes of what comprises everything. So rather, I think we can go a lot further rather than saying, well, electricity or those higher forces animate things. Well, that again connotes a separation. And in reality, it's just an outpicturing of one continuous model. Down at Anarchapulco this week, I did a presentation and I was supposed to talk about microbiology and things, but I said, folks, we're missing the boat here, because what we're talking about and what I see under the microscope, which is what I did for years, is one tiny little pinpoint, part of the whole energy matter continuum. There is no separation between those parts. Again, it's a fractal mirroring of the same things, as above, so below. And in order to get further in medicine, we have to understand how those forces that we think animate things are actually just a fractal, again, outpicturing of what's going on at the level of consciousness. And now, with real science, and what I do in agriculture, what I do in medicine, is we measure those forces, coming from those higher levels of consciousness. It can't be done with electronics and all the things in conventional science where they're trying to figure things out and measure things, because those very types of electronics and laboratory procedures will actually buffer out all of those other things that are actually giving everything form in the first place. So, we really have to outgrow this concept that there's a such thing as matter at all, or that matter is somehow connected or produced by or animated. It's just all a matter of perception of what, we experience here with what we put out with our own consciousness in the first place. So, great discussion. And I believe, again, we can go beyond just the theory that, we're electrical somehow. No, there's nothing else but electricity. And also the whole evolutionary model, which is kind of, again, this linear construct. And, consciousness expands in all directions at all times. And, you know, again, evolution gets into this kind of linear reductionist mindset sort of thing. So there's really a lot of things we need to outgrow. You know, I put out a lot of topics that we talk about, not because I read a book or it's theory. You know, I'm a clinician, I'm a farmer, and, you know, we have real problems that need solutions on the ground. And so we just need to find out what works. And what we find is that waveform mechanics, you know, and the understanding that we are in a thought-based universe produced by our own consciousness, and everything flows from that point, and that we're, you know, really in charge of the whole shebang. That's, you know, that's really where we're going. And then, you know, when you talk about the gurus and people that are, you know, tapping into that consciousness, with waveform mechanics and things, we can demystify that and reconcile that split, that schizophrenic split between our left and our, you know, right brain, so to speak. You know, it's not really our brain, but you understand what I'm saying. And, you know, just take it all the way to the next phase. And in our clinical work too, we find that, you know, not only is diet not the thing, but it's more should be, you know, approached from understanding diet as a reflection of where we're going at where we're at in other levels of our consciousness, of the food choices we, you know, we make and everything. But we also know from our laboratory medicine a fact that we derive at least 70% of our nutrition directly from the atmosphere. And the breatharians and the gurus and all those folks that, you know, have kind of proved that out in their own lives, and get even more than 70% of their nutrition from the atmosphere. Well, in waveform mechanics and things, we can explain exactly why that is not only true, but how we can also all get there and not be dependent on anything external to ourselves. So that's a lot of comments and everything. But, you know, what we're trying to do is just kind of elevate that whole conversation so humanity can, you know, just get on to the next step. And you've done an amazing job with, you know, connecting a lot of dots. And I love reading, you know, a lot of that same research. But again, when it comes to rubber meets the road, you know, the only thing that explains everything is going beyond concepts of matter in the first place. And, you know, that gets into sunlight, of course, which understands that this unified, you know, system that we inhabit, you know, there's no separation between ourselves and the sun, and we're individualizations of the same pattern. So when we start healing those levels of separation, then not only do we get those informational fields directly, but then our consciousness is healed and all those splits are healed. And, you know, with people like you coming up with actual technologies, you know, and with raw optics that allow people to be less interfered with those things that creates the schizophrenia in the first place, is remarkable. So again, as Michael already said, you know, my hat's really off to everything that you've achieved there.
Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate it. You're speaking my language. I just want to say, Dr. Bear, it's really, that's what I want to be more focused on, this type of discussion, that everything is just a continuum of energy and electricity, just maybe slowed down in a sense, or, you know, you use a little bit different terminology. But for me, that intuitively and based on what I've come to understand is the reality. But coming from, you know, the worlds where I'm typically speaking on podcasts, people have a really hard time sometimes swallowing the pill of what many consider woo-woo, even if it's just higher levels of understanding that aren't, I like what you said as well about substantiated by Western science, because people treat science like the be all end all. And based on a number of things, including books about Western science that I've read, but also, you know, things I've learned about that aren't considered science, but are inherently true, I've also come to have tremendous, or at least to see the limitations of science, if not to have doubts about it. You know, for example, there's a book called The Structure of Scientific Revolutions by Thomas Kuhn, where he speaks about how all of science is not linear growth, but it's actually these paradigm shifts, is the term he coined, and these revolutions that occur where for largely a generation, we're living in basically the outdated paradigms of the previous generation, and it takes like all of those experts basically to die for things to really shift, and it's through these revolutions that occurs. So for us to assume that what's currently held as true by experts and scientists today is actually true is just like saying that, you know, the bureaucrats in charge of the government have everyone's best interests at heart all the time. And it's just couldn't be further from the reality. So that's what I've come to understand, as well as reading, you know, books, for example, about electromagnetic radiation and the work of Dr. Andrew Marino, who was the protege of Becker from the Body Electric, who wrote the Body Electric. And Marino went ahead and studied how these external fields, of course, could affect this internal system that Becker was describing, and went ahead and got himself into a lot of trouble challenging the power companies in all sort of legal battles as a scientific witness, who also happened to have, in addition to his PhD, a law degree. And because he had a law degree, he was really dangerous when they would cross-examine him, because they couldn't put anything past him as the lawyers, because he was also a lawyer, just also sitting on the witness bench. And therefore, you know, they gained a lot of attention and led to a lot of research and study by even the Navy on the effects of radar. But all of that was classified, hidden, it sort of swept under the rug. And their lab also concurrently was defunded because it was a Veterans Administration lab in Syracuse. And so, you know, the whole electromagnetic field thing was able to explode a decade and a half later in the 90s, when cell phones were invented, you know, and this was before I was born, but that's how it happened based on my research and understanding. And even the people who were appointed as the head of the lobbying industry for the telecommunications industry, basically the lobbying body is called the CTIA, Cellular Telecommunications Industry Association, also known today as just the wireless industry. And the guy who was the first chair, the head of that body, named Tom Wheeler, was eventually, like almost 20 years later, appointed to be the head of the regulatory body by Obama in 2008, the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, which he used his abilities to pass basically to pass something that wasn't through Congress or anything, but called Spectrum Frontiers, which is what allowed for the basically use of broader wavelengths that include the bands for 5G and what, you know, they say is for faster internet and self-driving cars, but is also for entirely Internet of Things, surveillance-based society based on a lot of the evidence out there today. And so, you know, and there were actually researchers who conducted the study that the telecommunications industry began when Motorola was sued for causing someone's brain cancer in the 90s. And these lawsuits have been accumulating, and more people have been suing, but based on certain legislation, and that I'm not super familiar with all of these details. Basically, there's legislation that was passed that sort of immunized the telecommunications companies against litigation and being held liable for damages. And so one of the researchers actually who was in the study for the body of the telecommunications industry that participated in a lot of the corrupt research actually came out later on. His name's Dr. George Carlo, and he actually said what was going on, like decided to be a whistleblower. And apparently he faced some real challenges as a result of doing that. And but his story's out there, Dr. George Carlo. So yeah, I'm thoroughly skeptical of Western science on a number of levels for these reasons and many others. And I'm totally with you, you know, and then like reading about Ram Dass and all these. Ram Dass was the first spiritual book I ever read, Be Here Now. And it was so mind opening that, you know, it's hard to go back when you have at least a taste of that understanding. You know, it's kind of like I find myself just seeking for that understanding. Yeah. And nothing else really.
I mean, we're at the point right now. I was just going to say, Bear, we're at the point right now where I think finally the Western mind, and this is something what we do with AlphaCast, is ready for the new real full spectrum science, which science is, and I'm not talking about the edifice of the body politic that is currently science. I'm talking about the real scientific method, which is looking at the full spectrum reality from what we can observe and what we can understand, is ready for what we call metaphysics, right? We're ready to now finally engage it all into a spirit science of sorts, where we can take in the traditional Eastern mysticism and stuff from the mystery schools and esoteric traditions, and compile that with the newest technologies, that stuff that like Bear uses, that is actually scientific, but is challenging because it's the physics. It comes down to the physics, and understanding the physics needs to be completely rewritten. But we're there. We're like almost there, Matt. And so what you're doing is exciting, because you're in a journey right now at your young age to really experience that. And like your generation is going to see this massive this revolution in science. I truly believe that. And where the reductionist model of just trying to reverse engineer thing by getting to the smallest parts is been completely disrupted through the quantum revolution, or that we're seeing that, hey, the farther we go down, the crazier it gets. It doesn't make any sense. That's because it's not based on reductionism, right? It's the opposite. So we need to go to source, which would be the sun, and then look down from there. And then we can see everything through our heart intuition and knowledge and wisdom, which has all been traditionally spiritual. But as Bear says in ways that is very scientific, in terms of waveform mechanics and the new physics that's coming, we can understand that with our more Western mindset and open it up to where we finally have a true holistic model of reality, based in the fact that it is all information. It's a thought-based reality, and it's so anyways, it's a really exciting time for me, because I'm seeing it. Very soon here, we're going to see it. And so it's I appreciate what you're doing, because you are one of those bridges. You're one of those bridges for the Western mindset to start to really unravel all this stuff. And the best way for me to do it is prove it in our lives, right? Prove it through how it affects our life. Like, I get this all the time. Oh, you have crazy ideas and you have weird beliefs, but look at my life. I'm healthy. I'm never sick. I'm always, I'm pretty much always happy, in a good mood, have vital life. And it's because of that greater understanding, as like, we are in charge. We are the consciousness, as Bear said, that's connected to the sun. It's like a toroidal field, right? Where the sun is hitting us and we're going back into the sun. It's this loop. It's this loop of 0 point energy. And we're there. We're almost there. Go ahead, Bear.
Yeah, I'd say we're already there, and we've never left there. We just don't realize it yet. Matt, I had more of a question for you. Just actually your thoughts on something. Quick comment first. We can explain exactly how a cell knows how to differentiate into a Kupffer cell in the liver, or any cell that you can think of. That's very understandable. And it's also would be the same for, how does an apple tree know how to express into a full grown tree with the characteristics of the tree that dropped its seed on the ground for a new tree to grow from that. It's going to have the same taste and all these things. Well, the great hint is that the information for an apple tree to do that is not contained in the seed. It's nowhere near the seed. And that's another whole really fun discussion. And it would also explain how cells differentiate. But my question for you is, you obviously came in wired a little bit differently. And, and just looking at things different, asking different questions, desiring different experiences, not willing to settle for, just a mediocre level of health or life. So how do you account for that compared to what we see around us with a lot of people that just are maybe not even asking those questions, or willing to take the risk, but actually, getting triggered, quite a bit when this kind of information is, when they're exposed to it. So why is it that you come in the way you do? And I think the answer, can also be found in my little comments about that particular apple seed expressing in a certain way. But go for it.
Well, that's the direction I was going to go, especially given the tone of this interview, and which I really appreciate. Normally, I would, in response to that question, try to logically explain things that I observed that were different about my childhood. But honestly, I have no idea. I mean, like I just always I knew from a very young age that I'm bound to do something very important in my lifetime, in this lifetime. I'm not fully sure what that is, but I'm definitely, helping people at least with their understanding of how light affects the body right now. And for me, that's amazing. And having a business that I have at my age and helping people sleep better is fantastic. So I couldn't say, but ever since I was really young, I can say whenever I would watch like a movie and see a character who was really inspiring and doing something great, I would always really resonate with that character, not like I'm observing them, but like I am them, and that like that's what I'm supposed to be doing, something important. So yeah, I try to keep my ego out of it as best I can, but I just feel like I want to, I'm just inherently driven to do great things. And I do feel, sort of concurrent to our earlier conversation before we went on air about this inner challenge I have about even just something as seemingly simple as like a home base. As a nomad who's been traveling for so long, I feel that having such I have such strong ambitions at my core that sometimes I make it hard. I feel like I make things hard for myself because I feel like if I'm not seeing huge results, in every moment all the time, feel like I'm somehow slacking off from task. If that makes any sense, I think probably does. So, but that's just how it is. And maybe you could help me better understand it at some point.
Well, one thing I'll say real quick, and this goes back to your comment about science, the evolution, how it comes in spurts, right? How we have these big innovations. Well, that's from individuals. That's from an individual's consciousness, like a Copernicus or a Galileo, or or a Walter Russell or Tesla, that spurns that. And what is that? That's this divine spark. That's this consciousness that comes into this reality that that provides us with this next step. And so this is important for us to understand, that it's not this generic kind of evolution, but it's about the individual hero's journey is so important for all of our, because we're all tapped together, right? I believe we're all in the same field. We're all part of the same source. We're all essentially a expression from the same place. That is and that portal is for this reality right here that we're all experiencing is coming from the sun. So you're a perfect embodiment of that idea that you are here to give us that little boost in the same way that I'm here to do on my end with what I'm doing. And I think there are special individuals in the history of humanity that we know of that have done that. So the more that we can look into that and understand that, I think that's exciting. So yeah, whether that's we go into reincarnation or what on the spiritual side, I think it's important to be aware of that and to embrace that and to celebrate that, because individualism, while we all are connected, the individual incarnation that affects this reality and the ability for one person to change the timeline is fascinating to me and really empowering. What do you say, Bear?
Well, I just sum it up by saying we are a sum of our experience, and our experience is much more encompassing than what we usually consider. So it's all there waiting to express. So I believe certain people, just have their memory a little bit closer to the surface and, express more in any given embodiment, and again, we can really get into the waveform mechanics behind that and explain what an Akashic record is and how that works, and even tie it into the periodic table of elements as we think about it, which is taught completely wrong in conventional chemistry. But yeah, there are a lot of interesting things. But Matt, obviously you're drawing on the totality of your consciousness. It's been around the block more than a few times probably. And, that's what you're bringing forth right now. Another comment, we talked about being nomads. And I also, told you that my wife and myself had a little bit of that inclination in ourselves. And, if you look at intelligent quotients that have been developed in order to measure intelligence in the population, that have gone well beyond what we do in academics, where you take an IQ test and give yourself a number, which is a bunch of crap, because that's not what intelligence is. But there's been some clever, intelligent constructs, tests that have been developed that look at things in a much more, I use the term loosely, holistic way. And their findings are quite remarkable. And they find that nomadic people in the world test out highest in intelligence just because of, the degree of flexibility and the lifestyle they adapt it. Requires them kind of tapping into a whole different method of reality that isn't based on materialistic roots. So, I don't think there's any coincidence either that you find yourself, just enjoying traveling the planet and being resourceful enough to figure out how to operate a multi-million-dollar company at the same time. So, it's amazing.
I appreciate it. Yeah, it's great to hear you share that from that perspective, because like I said, I can feel the world, maybe the ground level. I think you described it as on the ground. Yeah, I can feel the ground part of things sort of drawing me a little bit, maybe more than I want it to sometimes, or than it's meant to. And that explanation of nomadic lifestyle is very, very nice for me to hear. So thank you for that. That's great.
Yeah, and actually, I've been doing a lot of research on bloodlines going back from the days of Atlantis, pre-Diluvian, and what a lot of people have tracked is that those tribes that when Atlantis fell became nomadic. And those became what were called the Tartarians, but it was actually like the Huns. And Attila Hun and a lot of the tribes that came down from Northern Europe into Rome, those were actually much more advanced than what we've been told. Is we're told that they were the quote unquote barbarians, but in fact they were nomadic for a purpose, because they were going all the way back to their spiritual kind of residence from the Atlantis and Lemurian times even, and so they understood that. To be in the flow doesn't mean you have to have castles and war, and even though they became warlike, but they were in that flow when they were constantly moving. And I think that's important, Bear, is to stress that. Yeah, like, in another way too, we're spiritual nomads when we're always trying, if we're really spiritually tapped in, we're always on a journey. We're always going places with our spirituality, with our consciousness. So to be able to embody that at your age, Matt, you said before show, like I've been asked a few times in our community lately with people in their 20s, what should I do right now? Should I start prepping? Should I start a farm? Should I start a business? And my go-to answer is go out and explore the world. Have that adventure while you don't have as many responsibilities. Maybe you don't have children yet. You're not married. Because I feel like you get more and more tied down traditionally, especially in the West, the older you get. So to go out and have those journeys and experience the world, so important. My question for you right now, though, is how are you doing that right now? I mean, are you having to get tests everywhere? I mean, for you, how's that experience been traveling in the world of COVID?
Yeah, thanks for asking. Well, I was actually in Costa Rica intending on sort of like living here, basing myself here for a little while, just about a year ago. And that was when the outbreak began, quote unquote outbreak. And I don't really know what to make of it all. I really haven't invested my energy into it, because I just felt like, I could have become an expert on, if I did, I would have become an expert on all the things that are wrong with COVID and all the lies and manipulation about it. But some part of me, I think a more intelligent part of me, just decided to let a lot of other people focus on that and do the research and interview the experts, and just kind of like live in my blissful ignorance, that just intuitively knowing that something is awry and that I'm just not going to buy into it and I actually said as soon as it was happening, I was like, whatever this thing is, I want to get it just so I can, if it's even real. But anyhow, I did leave Costa Rica because when you have the US government and in the beginning, no one knows what's really going on. And so I was kind of a little bit afraid, especially being out of the country, and like not having a clue what might happen, if it was some Armageddon like scenario that maybe I would be trapped and stuck and, not have access to resources. So I just decided to go home, and I was actually with a cousin of mine who lives in Idaho, or at least his family lives in Idaho, and they have lots of guns and elk and, all that stuff. So I thought, safe bet, go to Idaho, live off, live off the grid. And then I ended up going from there to San Diego about 5-6 months in June, when things sort of calmed down a little bit. And then I stayed there for about 6 months, just kind of like getting roots under my feet, which was actually nice. I wasn't nomadic those 6 months. I was pretty stable. Although many would say if you move every 6 months, you're effectively nomadic, which is kind of like where I'd like to be no matter what. Maybe not every 6 months, but you get the idea. And so the point is, getting out here wasn't very hard to Costa Rica. I just had to fill out a health form and say I didn't have certain symptoms, and then just come in, and that was basically it, and pay for a certain travel insurance. To go to Mexico, where I went recently for a Dr. Joe Dispenza event, was also pretty easy. They didn't require anything at all, actually, any information. So you just travel like normal there. So Mexico's pretty open, Costa Rica's pretty open. Other countries are a lot more closed, but I think what I'll do if I am going to foreign countries is just go to the places where I can live somewhat more normal of a lifestyle. I'll be going to Hawaii in a couple of weeks, and maybe go to Europe over the summer, and Europe should be relatively open. I actually, speaking of Atlantis, I want to go to the Delphinians, area, Delphi, and go to the Oracle at Delphi and touch the omphalos, the stone in the middle. That was my advice from someone I worked with who supposedly tapped into the Akashic records, which sounded like a cool experience regardless. So if Greece is open, I'll go to Greece. And I have an Irish passport, thankfully, so that really can help my nomadic abilities to have an American and an Irish passport, just in many different cases. And so it's not that hard. It's pretty straightforward.
Sounds like a great plan. And, there's something to that, touching the stone, because when you look at spatial coordinates in terms of geography, from our perception, and there are real consciousness, sentient, people having experiences, and also understanding that time is also a perceptive construct. It leaves a real imprint, a real resonance, literally a download in that particular place. And so when you go to some of these places where certain events have, historically happened, you can get, more than just a contact reflection from that, and real adepts can go there and literally replay the whole video at will. But, for those of us that are a little less tapped in that way, you can very much get a lot of information on other levels and insights that will, unfold for quite a time. So I would also encourage you to go touch the stone if you're inclined to do that. So Matt, what do you see going? We'll comment on that too, but what do you see also going forward for yourself? You've achieved quite a lot in a short time, and any plans beyond what you're doing now?
Yeah, thank you. Well, to comment on the omphalos, the stone, it's interesting to think that like back in the day, the Oracle, like Delphi was a very, considered like the center of the universe, and the Oracle at Delphi was sort of considered the center of that in the Greek times. And so like people would come from all around the world literally to get wisdom, and to think that that's just an archaeological site that us mortals can, we're not really mortals, but you get what I'm joking about, that we can go and actually touch that and be there in the presence of that. And it's just sort of like, let's take a picture. But if you're, I can imagine, like you said, if you're tapped into certain energy, that it could be tremendously beneficial on many levels. And also it was interesting to look at the picture of the oracle at Delphi and then the omphalos and notice that it's shaped like a pine cone, especially having been at Dispenza's week-long event where he talks a lot about, basically the pineal gland and how it's shaped like a pine cone, or at least there's some quality that is similar. And that's why, the Pope has a little pine cone on there on his staff, and in the Vatican they have a pine cone, and it's sort of symbolic in a lot of places and cultures. But the omphalos is actually sort of shaped like that, and it's in the center of sort of like a dome that basically looks like a brain, with the pineal gland kind of sitting in the base where the pineal gland sits, sort of in the midbrain area. And I just thought that was an interesting coincidence, that it's sort of like the brain of the universe in ancient Greece, and that's where they can download that wisdom. So, and that our brain essentially is sort of like that, a big antenna for downloading wisdom and information from the universe. I just, might be an inaccurate observation, but it seemed pretty on point, if I could say so. So anyhow, as far as my plans for the future, this has been a particularly inspiring conversation, and I really appreciate it. I see myself, continuing down my path of growth and learning. That's really all I want to do, is just continue to tap into as much of the wisdom that's available as I possibly can. And whatever that involves, I will accept graciously. So if that involves going different places and traveling, I'll do that. If that involves sort of like, quote unquote, hunkering down a little bit, which I'm often called to as well, and really focusing on studies and things, because that I find it to be pretty hard to go deeper into the reading and research that I was doing so much of in high school, while I'm kind of in the, let's call it instability, what feels like instability on the surface of the nomadic lifestyle. But again, I'm certain there's a potential in the quantum field that I could be both nomadic and very much committed and focused to my at least intellectual studies. I think as a nomad, like we discussed, I'm in a sense focused on the deeper than intellectual studies by being nomadic, and I don't give myself enough credit for that, because I think sometimes like I assume that all the knowledge I need is contained in books, which I believe is an inaccurate belief. So yeah, I'd really like to just focus on that. It's likely that with my business, we'll offer a broader selection of products. It's highly probable we'll offer a much broader selection of products that are solutions to basically the risks of the indoor damaged, harmful, I should say damaging lighting environment. So maybe we're offering things like lights. Maybe we'll be offering a lot of different things, light therapy sources. I don't want to give too much away, but we'll be offering a lot of amazing things that people can use in the next couple of years. And my goal is that people can have that sort of stepping stone to go from just focusing on their diet and exercise for health to light and energy. And then, as it was in my case, I think people will be more and more ultimately receptive to greater levels of consciousness and greater levels of wisdom, like the things that you guys are clearly focused on. So that's where I see this going. And I don't know, I don't think it'll ever end. That'll be my life.
Yeah. I absolutely see you just getting started here, and have no doubt that that a lot of greater things are to come. So and also in your travels, if you ever find yourself in the Northwest, you always have a home here for as long as you need. We've got
I really appreciate
a
that.
beautiful
Actually,
place, and yeah, so come visit us anytime.
As we were speaking, I was getting some downloads that I should definitely come visit you guys sooner than later. So I'll definitely send you a message, but I would, for me, I find myself somewhere when I decide to go there, so basically I'm already decided that I'll come visit you guys. So it's just a matter of time, as they say. And
you're welcome here to hit the river and do everything we do and check out the farm. Matt, This has been great. You're an embodiment of really the independent, vision of the West, right? The individualism, the ability to live your dreams, go out, create your own business. There's some chatter here about capitalism and stuff in the chat right now. And I was saying, someone was calling us or calling you a capitalist. And I'm like, capitalism traditionally is using money to make money. And it's actually a twisted term used by communist socialists to denigrate free markets. Free market entrepreneurship is creating something out of the ether from your thoughts, from your own creative mental plane, and providing that in exchange. It's via commerce. And it gives you the ability then to live a free life and go out and have these explorations and push the levels of where we can go as a human race. And that is what I love about the American dream and what I love about traditionally free markets. And you are doing it. And so any comments on that, on how's it been kind of, you were real quick, I'd love to just touch on, and then I know probably want to go, but on your journey towards being an entrepreneur at such a young age, and how that came about and how that's been for you. And also one other question too, you have a glass company, and I noticed you don't sell any sunglasses. It's blue blocking glasses. I'd love for you to touch a little bit on that. And, we didn't get as deep into.
Yeah. Well, I have more time, just so you know, I
Okay.
can't answer all these questions. I could go practically as long as you guys want, really. So,
Well, that's one thing I think a lot of people get confused about. One is being an entrepreneur and being a quote unquote capitalist. And then two, you don't sell sunglasses. I'd love for your take on that, but yeah, take it wherever you want.
If I could say, if I had to have defense about, in a courtroom, I would love you to be my defense, because that was very elegantly put. The way you described that capitalism or capitalist is a term used to denigrate people who are trying to do good things in the world. Obviously, there are immoral capitalists who do things in a way that's not beneficial for their constituents or their employees or their customers. And that is just a matter of consciousness, I think, a level of consciousness. But if you have someone who has, or at least has, or is working on higher levels of consciousness, who's engaging in capitalism, I don't think that there could be a much greater pursuit on the ground, as we're saying, because it's really helping, just like you guys are capitalists in a sense. I mean, taking resources or utilizing resources from the earth and recycling and building something and educating and helping people. And as a clinician, Dr. Bear, helping people live better lives. And if that's, in someone's paradigm, a negative thing, then I really personally would rather not be a part of that paradigm. And, I could only offer love to someone who's thinks that what I'm trying to do is bad for the world.
Matt, I don't want to interrupt your flow. Hold on to that. Very quick comment. Capitalism to me is slow motion precipitation. And precipitation is practiced by the highest spiritual adepts historically, who are able to understand the origin of everything and their role in that manifestation, so they can precipitate directly from the ethers without any in-between steps. So capitalism is a very high spiritual practice that allows us to experience that slow motion precipitation, if you will, through a medium of capital. And of course, if you understand that, which a lot of the anti-capitals have no clue about, it's just a matter of time. And you're probably experiencing it all the time. And a lot of people that are successful in the money world, they find that, wow, once they start making money, all of a sudden, it just keeps coming quicker and quicker. And it's because they're building up that velocity and getting close to that, that instant manifestation principle. So capitalism can be one of the highest or most effective vehicles for spiritual realizations. Sorry, go ahead with what you're talking about.
I appreciate you saying that. I mean, I have a friend who's a yogi in the Kriya Yoga tradition in India, who's also a nomad, and I've met traveling the world now on a couple different occasions. And he said, contrary to my expectation, he said that it's like a tremendous blessing to have a business. And it means that I'm, in his words, very blessed. And I thought that was pretty cool, to hear that from a yogi. But that's just, he works with lots of businessmen as sort of clients, and it basically says the same thing that you just shared, that it's a way to express, consciousness in the world in many ways. So anyway, thank you for sharing that. So we're focused on capitalism, and then we're talking about the sunglasses. So as far as sunglasses and why we don't sell sunglasses, that is, I would refer back to the part of the conversation where we're speaking about how we are, beings of light, and we benefit from sunlight energy. Putting a sunglass lens on would be like putting a tarp on the tree in the backyard and just hoping that it might photosynthesize, because our eye is one of the primary, really the primary receptacle for light in our body, for light energy. And if we put sunglasses on, we're not fully blocking all the light, but we're blocking huge portions, if not all, of some of the most important portions of the light spectrum. And so what could be really beneficial sunlight all of a sudden can become extremely damaging light, because our brain can no longer, not only can our eyes and brain no longer adjust our body to the wavelengths that are coming in correctly. So like we can start getting more prone to sunburn or even skin cancer, because the stimulus for the production of melanocyte stimulating hormone is stimulated through the eye. So our skin can't make as much melanin if our eyes are covered. But that's just one out of potentially hundreds or thousands of processes that are stimulated with light hitting on the eye. Not potentially, actually, there's a book called The Influence of Ocular Light Perception on Metabolism in Man and Animal, which is from a German researcher, and it's a very science, just dense, light-based book. But it's funny, dense, light-based book, but it's dense as far as the research goes, but light in its energy. And he basically observes the research and his own research as well over the past 100 years that show that light affects through the eye alone every single hormonal and organ system in the body, and that patients with cataracts who become blinded had tremendous abnormalities in all sorts of different hormones and metabolites in their urine. And when those cataracts were removed so that light could pass through their eyes normally, a lot of things just began to normalize immediately. And that's just one example of many, many different things they observed. But so wearing sunglasses is one of the best ways I would suggest if someone wanted to disrupt these processes in the body. And so therefore, I don't advocate sunglasses. So our products are meant to only be used when exposed to man-made artificial light sources, which are detrimental to our body, except if they're, incandescent bulbs could be less detrimental, and halogen bulbs, like 12-volt halogen bulbs, can be less detrimental. And intentionally designed red light therapy panels and light therapy panels can be beneficial. Not the bright white sad light boxes. Those I think are not a good idea based on the spectrum that they emit. They could be designed in such a way to be more beneficial. But in general, man-made light sources are harmful and the sun's beneficial. So we want to get more of the light. And then on the same wavelength, sunscreen and chemical sunscreens, I strongly recommend against people using, because they absorb into our skin and they're full of, generally speaking, very toxic chemicals that become only more toxic and cancer causing when exposed to ultraviolet light, because basically in protecting and dissipating the ultraviolet light energy into heat, which is what these chemicals typically do, a large portion of these are degraded into what become really toxic chemicals, all of which are absorbing into our bloodstream. So sunscreen is inherently often very toxic, except what I recommend and use personally if I'm surfing and I'm in Costa Rica, what I will burn. There's these mineral-based sunscreens like zinc oxide, which don't absorb into the bloodstream. So you have to wipe them off. And you can actually probably see I have a little bit of residue of one still on my face, but it just makes you look a little bit all white and crazy, but you just wipe it off afterwards. And that's sort of the gist of that is the gist of why not to wear sunglasses. But on that note, maybe just to share something people can actually utilize based on what I've learned, I'd love to share, if it's okay with you guys, some of the steps of the protocol that I call the light diet, which people can actually utilize to improve their health.
Please do. And I'm interested to know if you do sun gazing as well, but go ahead.
Yeah, well, so the light diet, as I share it, typically is 8 steps. I'm sort of refining them all the time, so it could be adjusted. But basically, the 8 steps at the simplest form are sleep with the sun. So sleeping with the sun involves a couple sub steps, which are avoid eating late. So like, basically eating with the sun involves eating, if we are eating food, eating the majority of our food, which I do eat food. I'm not a breatharian yet, but maybe one day, which I think is a very valid point, Dr. Bear, that you brought up that we didn't speak on much, but I do believe that's very possible based on the research that people can utilize more than just 70% of their energy from light and atmosphere and prana and so on. But anyhow, eating with the sun involves, eating the majority of our calories in the morning and midday hours and very little after the hours of even 1 or 2 p.m., maybe like a light dinner, but usually dinner is the heaviest meal of the day. Whereas based on what I've learned from the circadian biology research and my friend who's a yogi, they both align very nicely that the majority of our food should be consumed when the sun is the strongest in the midday hours, late morning, midday, when our metabolism is most active. And then in the evening, it should be very light food. And my friend who's a yogi, also, his name is Balarama, and I'll refer to him henceforth as that. But he has opened my eyes to the value of vegan diets and so on. So whereas in the past, coming from the Paleolithic world, I was more focused on a seafood-based Paleolithic diet, but understanding that we can be run off of light and energy. I don't really talk too much about diet because that's the best way in the circles that I've run in to get sort of labeled and attacked. I just focus as the light diet guy, but I am very open to the potential of just using a vegan-based diet. Although again, there's so many people who are fully carnivore-based, and so it's such a touchy subject.
Believe me, we know we get attacked by both sides because we're on the same level as you, Matt. Go ahead.
Great. Yeah. And it's funny to be around, again, people like us or Dr. Dispenza, where, he jokes very, very freely about like gluten-free diets and people trying to solve all these sorts of issues, whether it's gluten-free or vegan or paleo or keto. And it's like, what are we talking about essentially? But so that's one piece of step 1, sleep with the sun. Another is to watch the sunset. So sun gazing is a very, very valuable piece of the protocol. And that's something that I highly recommend people do, primarily from my research and understanding for the circadian rhythm setting benefits of sun gazing. However, I am aware of, and not fully studied into, but aware enough of the other benefits of sun gazing from the Eastern perspective, and activating the pineal gland. Of course, in the Western research, this is linked to the production of serotonin in the morning, more melatonin in the evening, and all sorts of other chemicals which are related to the pineal gland. So when I learned that sun gazing is this ancient practice used to elevate consciousness and so on, and entrain with the greater energy of the universe, it made a lot of sense that the Western research is starting to find bits and pieces of how beneficial it is. So yes, I recommend this. And then I would recommend, and these are just protocols like anyone can use, but basically I would also recommend going to sleep with, within a few hours of sunset. That's why the step is generally labeled as sleep with the sun. So, for example, like 8 or 9 p.m., I find if I can go to sleep like 8 or 9 p.m. and wake up earlier than sunrise to do some sort of meditation or energy practice, that's like my ideal. And again, that's both what I had learned from this Western scientific perspective and am learning more and more. My friend, the yogi, does, and people like Dr. Dispenza does, and then anyone else who's really often spiritually awakened is waking up at 3 or 4 in the morning just by nature and doing their meditation and energy practices. So that's step 1, sleep with the sun. Step 2 is wake with the sun, which involves, again, waking up in the morning, ideally naturally before sunrise, even a couple hours before sunrise, like 3 or 4 a.m. ideally, but I'm not always up that early. In fact, usually I'm not. I'm sort of working that direction. But then we would go out and watch the sunrise, and that would be a very important thing, just like watching the sunset and setting our circadian rhythm. And then we would want to consume, again, our breakfast and any food like in that morning period. So that's sort of the waking with the sun side of the equation. And then living outdoors during the day would be step 3. And so that just basically means live outside. So step 1 and 2 involve our repair and our setting of our rhythm and timing of our body. Step 3 involves just being outdoors and connected to nature, connected to sunlight, and getting that charging effect. Another piece of this step 3 would be sunbathing amply. So not only just being outdoors and not behind windows and glass and under artificial light sources that disrupt our biology and disconnect us from the energy of the sun, but when we actually lay in the sun directly and bathe in it, we get a tremendous number of benefits like vitamin D production and charging of our cellular water and increased production of a lot of different chemicals and hormones, and the whole shebang is when we're also in direct sunlight. It's elevated, but people have to be super careful with that. So that step can become very complicated because if someone has darker skin, they can handle more sun and even need more sun oftentimes. If someone has lighter skin, they can't handle as much sun and need to be more careful building up their exposure. So generally, as a broad sweeping recommendation, which is not effective for this, but just as one anyway, because people typically want one, I would recommend people start with like 5 minutes of sunbathing per day, or even, I would even go a little bit less. I'd say like 3 minutes on each side of their body and building up by about 2 to 3 minutes each day on each side of the body. Even that can be a little bit aggressive for some of the palest people and absolutely insufficient for people with darker skin who are often tremendously deficient in vitamin D if they live in a northerly latitude where their skin wasn't evolved. And again, conversely, someone like me, I can barely manage myself in Costa Rica after 9 a.m. because the sun is so strong that I'm just overheating like all day. If I didn't have a pool to get in 10 times a day, I would be, a raisin. So that's step 3, living outdoors during the day and sunbathing amply. Step 4 is to drink unfluoridated spring water. So, the energy or the substance, in a sense, that encapsulates the light energy would be water, largely in our body. And if it's full of fluoride and all kinds of other toxic chemicals, runoff, and all the other things that get into municipal water sources, then we're going to have huge issues. That's like a huge broad sweeping thing that anyone can do that can have huge benefits, also as well as helping to stop calcifying the pineal gland, of course. Step 5, well, actually just back to step 4. I mean, you guys are expert on this and helping people source natural, probably spring water and even maybe vortex and structure and energize their water. So there's people out there who know a lot more about that than I do, but there's lots of ways to do that. Not only getting clean spring water, but structuring it, energizing it, charging it, and so on. So then step 5 is currently to eat a seasonal and seafood-based diet. Now, again, based on our conversations about diet, this is always sort of subject to change, but seasonal is the key. So eating basically what's available in nature around us. So it should be probably seasonal and local. But the reason seafood-based is a piece is because from my original learnings of the concepts of the light diet, having that omega-3 DHA is very beneficial to the human body. However, again, based on what I've been learning in the last couple of years, even since developing this protocol, it's very possible that we could, if we're at the highest level of functioning, we can either better convert plant-based sources of omega-3 into DHA, like, for example, flax. But again, I don't have evidence to prove that that's the case. I just imagine it'd be possible based on all the other things we've discussed as possible. But also that the DHA that we've taken in from our mothers and at birth and so on, that we could basically maintain it better throughout our life and not to need to recycle it throughout our life as much from our diet. And additionally, I wouldn't be surprised if on some more quantum level, we're able to synthesize our own DHA entirely independent of dietary sources. But again, that's me jumping on a bit of a ledge there. But that's step 5. That's kind of focused on food. Step 6 is to take advantage of temperature therapy. So like ice baths, getting in the cold. This, again, things anyone can do. Going out into nature, jumping in a cold body of water, or just even a temperate body of water like the ocean or a lake or a river or a pool. This has benefits for our cells, kickstarting our mitochondria to produce energy. People are probably familiar with Wim Hof in this community, the Iceman, who as a Northern European benefits really tremendously from cold exposure, as most Northern Europeans would, because it really optimizes our cells functioning, essentially, sort of slowing things down and kickstarting our mitochondria to produce a lot of energy as heat, or release a lot of heat energy. And then obviously we could take advantage of things like saunas and so on as well, or just even sunbathing is sort of a form of like heat therapy. So that's another, that'd be step 6. Step 7 would be to avoid man-made electromagnetic field exposure. So things like, for example, EMF from phones, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, the simplest things everyone can do is turn your phone on airplane mode and keep it on airplane mode all the time. And if you need to use it, then turn it off and just keep it off your body. If you need to leave it on all the time, keep it in a backpack or a purse, or just keep it across the room so that you're not getting irradiated quite as much, because distance makes a huge difference. The biggest recommendation is don't live in major cities. They're rolling out 5G technology, and there's already a tremendous amount of 4G and 3G, highly damaging wavelengths. Again, people like Dr. Joe Dispenza and other experts out there, and maybe even you guys, might believe that we can elevate our consciousness such that these fields don't affect us. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's also possible. But I personally wouldn't take the chance. It'd be like smoking cigarettes while you're meditating and thinking like that's a good idea. It's probably not the best idea, although it's not necessarily not possible. Like lots of Chinese Taoist Kung Fu masters at the tops of mountains smoke cigarettes all day long, and they're very robustly healthy. So obviously our energy can overcome a lot of things in the physical world. But anyway, that would be step 7 to avoid these things. So also turning off Bluetooth, turning off Wi-Fi while we sleep, killing the circuit in our house, building houses intelligently so that maybe the electrified portion is just one quadrant of the house with the washer, dryer, refrigerator, car charger, or whatever it is that we're using. And then the rest of the house is completely without any circuitry whatsoever. I've learned a lot in this period. You guys probably know a ton about this as well, I would imagine. But things like biogeometry and learning about building houses to, in not only in places where there aren't ley lines and geopathic stressors that can affect our body, but also building the structure of the house in a way that is taking advantage of the energy of the earth. There's a great podcast by a friend of mine named Paul Check, interviewing a gentleman named Ibrahim Karim, who spent his career studying this energy, this earth energy. You guys may be familiar with him, and how it's present, and how we can do things to our current houses and build new houses to maximally utilize this energy. Just things for people to be aware of as far as these energies. And of course, minimizing exposure to artificial light. So those are the things we can do. Some of the things we can do as far as reducing our exposure to non-native electromagnetic fields. And then step 8 would be to cultivate our inner light. So that was sort of the missing step for a long time for me. But if we do all this external stuff, but we're not working on our own internal state, then it's going to be often futile. And that's what I learned in my own experience. I had done so many things externally, my sunlight exposure, my blue light blocking glasses, taking ice baths, and all things that might give me a big hit and make me feel really great. But ultimately, if I was living by the hormones of stress and constantly in a state of panic, then, because of old emotional beliefs and living the emotions of the past over and over again, then I wouldn't make any progress. And that's where I was stuck for a while. And I'm currently working myself out of every day with my meditation practice and my general exercises and consciousness. So that's in a nutshell, light diet protocol that, again, they're all simple things that you guys probably do almost all of them or all of them already and more. But it's just things that someone who hasn't, like I hadn't learned of any of these things. So if someone had just handed me those steps in the beginning, it would have been so useful to completely reconnect to nature and just get those key main things to do. But if someone needs me to simplify it even more, I would just say, meditate in the morning, watch the sunrise, watch the sunset, sunbathe throughout the day, and eat the majority of your calories throughout the morning. and then block artificial light after the sun goes down. So those are like 6 light focused steps and inner light focused steps that anyone could do that can have a really huge benefit for our health.
Yeah. And I think everything that you just said could be the subject of a complete book on everything you need to know about health, and, a lot of the things that we've preached to people for a long time. And, it's really pretty intuitive when you just get the hang of it. And, to validate some of the things you've said, for instance, eating, more, say, midday, which, I come from a Latin culture, and they had their big, meal midday, and then had siesta time, then went back to work. And if you look at the acupuncture time clock, the way the meridians flow through just like the sun in the sky. At certain times, there's more energy preponderant in one particular part of the meridian system. And it just so happens that solar archetype energy, represented by the sun, is also, correlated with the small intestines as well as the heart. So, that means in our bodies at that particular time, more energy is concentrated in our digestive organs. And so it just kind of makes sense to eat our food at that point when everything's there. Another thing you mentioned is biogeometry. And I don't know if you can see, but on my desk here, these are all biogeometry tools.
Is that from Ibrahim's company? Or
yeah. Well, I've been through all their training and everything.
Oh,
for instance,
amazing.
This is what we call a human archetype ruler. And with different instruments, I can go through every organ system, chakra system, subplane of the mental, emotional, spiritual, physical planes, and really ascertain what's going on in particular bodies. I can go into a room and create geometries that are going to could create an abundance of what we call BG3 in biogeometry, which is a 3-part wave spectrum that, and I can pull apart those, measurements with these little gizmos here and things. And it gets into that qualitative measurement that I was alluding to. But with Wi-Fi and all these things, I would say, just like you said, people get the hell out of the cities, But if you do find yourself there, if you can find a biogeometry practitioner, you can actually create in your own habitat that's surrounded with smart meters and all these atrocious things. And so that an abundance of this BG3 comes in that will absolutely overcome those things. So rather than trying to protect yourself in ways, like with a lot of these gadgets we have, your technology is much different because you're blocking it through the eyes, which is amazing. But, a lot of these other shields that people use, it can be very valuable. But, the first thing we should do is create that energy in our space that is going to overcome all those lower, what we call in biogeometry, lower vertical noxious carrier waves so that they don't affect our biology as much. So, I apply biogeometry in medicine. If I'm planting a fruit tree outside, I'm going to find out exactly where it wants to be, how it wants to be oriented. And that, again, is going to allow it to thrive. It's going to allow our body to thrive when we make decisions based on that. And you were also talking about the formation of the stone that looks like the pineal gland. Well, every shape is a geometry, and geometry actually bends. It's a prism that bends the waveforms that then create the actual form that we consider physicality. So it's all about geometry, understanding waveform physics, in conjunction with geometry, then using geometry, just like we do in radiation geometry, biogeometry, to create the exact conditions that we want that are conducive for health, for our well-being. But most important, when we do that, it increases our perceptive bandwidth so that we can tune into those a much larger context that is going to give us the just innate understanding to come more to the surface as far as having the answers for everything we you know, we need just in the nick of time always, and learning to trust it. You know, you don't have to sweat anything really. So anyway, kind of a comment, but just also, you know, reinforcing everything that you're saying, that I'm 100% on board. And so I think we have a lot of commonality is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I definitely feel the same way. I look forward to visiting you guys soon.
Well, that's what I was saying, Matt, earlier, was like, dude, we are there. Like, and Bear, you know, rightfully says we've always been there. But, you know, I feel like we're like, with stuff like biogeometry and biodynamic farming, which is all tied in with you know, the universal patterns, and as you kind of hinted at, celestial elements up there, right, and how that's affecting us too, and then of course the sun, and then with stuff that with the energy, the new biology, and the new way we're seeing new physics with waveform physics, like we are in exciting times, my friend. And your protocol there is intuitive. It's very helpful to those who maybe don't want to step out towards, you know, what some would call woo-woo, because it is, you know, I was thinking it's like what farmers do for, you know, this is the life of a farmer. Get up before the sun rises, you know, have a little bit of your time. Maybe you go milk the cows, which is your meditation, with the animals connected. Then you see the sun come up as you start to work the fields all day. You're outside all day. You're not really around anything man-made. You're grounded to the earth. Like for me, I'm happiest when I'm just in a pair of shorts, barefoot, no shirt on, building fences, barefoot in the dirt, you know, out here on the property. I'm feeling charged. I'm feeling great. Have your, you know, what did farmers traditionally do? They had their supper, which was like 2 or 3 in the afternoon. That Aunt May would make or whatever. You come in, you have your family supper, you go back out, you work till the sun sets, you get to bed at 8 or 9 o'clock. I know this because I have farmers, and Bear knows we came from farmers. And then you do it all over again. And those were happy, healthy people. And they might not even been eating the best food, but they had long lives. And that was a culture that the US came from, the agrarian culture. So this is intuitive stuff, people. Matt's dead on too. He said, I wish somebody just had this package for me, because unfortunately kids these days don't have this information because they're inside, they're on their screens. They're, you know, that's the world that we have currently. But I believe there is a revolution coming. We will have analog technologies. We will have ways to have cities that are more integrated into nature, that have new technologies that allow for the light to come into buildings in ways that still give you the general protections that glass would and all that. I think that's all coming with folks like you, Matt, bringing this knowledge to the world. So important. One last thing too, you mentioned Paul Chek. I listened to a bit of your interview with Paul Chek, which was great. And I was kind of scanning through it. And one thing you brought up, which was really interesting on that talk, was and this is something I experienced for years and didn't realize it, was contact lenses, which to me is a total representation of the kind of fallacies of the modern marvels of science or of innovation, where we go wrong, where we think, you know, it kind of reminds me of like Tomorrowland in Disneyland, like the modern marvels of today, you know, tomorrow, today, you can put on this little piece of plastic on your eye and then see again. However, what you're doing is you're suffocating the eye, you're blocking important information from the sun. And I realized I had contacts from the time I was 15, 16 till I got LASIK surgery 6 years ago. I was dealing with a lot of health issues. And I always considered that it was because I, you know, in the germ theory model of things, I wasn't cleaning my hands when I was putting my contacts in. So I was delivering, you know, disease into my eye that way. But now I've learned that that is not how it works. That's not how disease works. Of course, that's not it. What was happening was I was suffocating one of the most important organs in my body from having that exchange with source, which is the sun. And so just that was a fascinating thing you brought up on that talk, was for those out there with contacts. I don't know what your opinion is on LASIK surgery, but for me, it changed my life. And they say you're going to have to get touch-ups, but with the sun gazing that I do and the healthy lifestyle I lead, my eyes have not denigrated at all since I had LASIK in 2014. I think I had it in. And so anyways, maybe close it out with this, but what's your opinion on the LASIK surgery and contacts?
Yeah, to this, I would have to defer to a mentor of mine who was the neurosurgeon who taught me about or showed me the direction of a lot of these things. And his perspective was that it could be damaging because when they shine the laser and they're doing the work they're doing, there's a photoreceptor in the eye called neuropsin that has a lot of important roles as far as hormonal signaling and all sorts of other things in the body. And many ophthalmologists who would conduct LASIK aren't really aware of the existence of neuropsin or would be able to know where exactly it is. And so it basically that it's possible that LASIK could affect the non-visual functions of the eye, which is what we're talking about here, the controlling our circadian biology and so on, empowering hormonal production and so on. So personally, I would recommend people not do LASIK. It sounds like if you're feeling healthy and well and you're having and you're doing great, then great. And I imagine even if someone has had LASIK and they did have this theoretical issue that could come along with it, that it can be overcome. But in general, the point is I would recommend people with bad vision work to reverse their poor vision through these protocols that I've shared by, for example, sun gazing. There's a common method called the Bates method that many people have used to reverse visual issues. There's Dr. Jacob Lieberman, who you guys interviewed,
Yes,
who has helped many people heal their vision by releasing emotional trauma and using color therapy.
yeah, I wish I knew about his work before I went into LASIK, believe me.
Just a quick comment, Mike, about vision. Vision is dependent on or determined by the eye being able to maintain its normal spherical, shape. And what does that is 6 primary muscles attached to the back of the eye. And like any muscle in the body, they share common networks with organs, meridians, and so forth. So if somebody comes in that I'm seeing and they have, eye issues and people would come in for that, we can determine with our testing which eye muscles are not in their highest level of integrity, trace that back neurologically to the involved organs, meridians, and so forth, which can even get into emotional levels and all sorts of stuff, and then treat on that level. And then that restores the integrity of the eye muscle. You do the same thing if you're repairing somebody's knee. And then their eyes improve as they work inside out to improve their health. And the real reasons why those muscles, which we understand are no more than a display for particular organ systems. So there it goes. You don't just go in and, surgically repair and expect, and Mike, I'm not saying that it didn't work for you, but there's a lot more to the picture, and there's solutions and things like sun gazing and things can have such extensive ramifications to all of your organ systems. That's why, people do experience improvement in eyesight as well, including when they just clean up their lifestyle.
Absolutely.
Sorry, just wanted to interject.
No, it makes total sense. And that's, we fall for this allopathic model of we have new technology to fix the biology and just with a laser, so that was my concern as I've become more aware of these issues. But I do like what you were saying, Matt, that we can remediate things. And this goes to the elasticity of the neurology and all these greater ideas, right? That maybe, and has to do with the vaccine right now and everything going on. Like, I personally believe it's never too late to fix stuff. You can always fix something. We are, superconductors of energy, and we can manipulate and change our physiology with all sorts of different ways through our consciousness, breath, sun, water. For me, that's like the Holy Trinity. So, hey man, this has just been, I could talk all day on this stuff. It's just been an amazing talk. We are coming up on 2 hours. I want to get out in the sun. I'm like looking at you, dude, there. And like, it's luckily a gorgeous day here. So I want to get out in the sun. Any final words for our audience? Any parting words from you, Matt, on health or wellness or journey of life?
I would just say thank you for having me on. I think we've given a lot of takeaways that people can utilize and take advantage of. And, the advice I would give to others is the advice I try to give to myself, which is just keep on focusing on the higher level of consciousness, which is the work of you guys, Dr. Joe, and all these other people that I'm always striving to do myself. So that's my objective. Yeah. And that's the advice I would give.
Thanks for being with us, Matt.
Yeah.
It's been delightful.
So much. I appreciate it.
Hey, thanks you guys out there listening. Thank everybody on the chat. We had a lively chat on both YouTube and DLive. Love you guys. If you enjoyed this, please give it a thumbs up, a share, and you can find Matt's company over at Raw Optics. In fact, if you are interested in getting some of these glasses, you can just go to alphavedic.com/blue blockers, and that'll lead you right to the site. You'll get a little discount through us. They are amazing. I've had a number of different glasses, and I realized that a lot of those weren't really doing the job. Matt's gone the distance here. These work. These are amazing. So check it out, alphavedic.com/blue blockers. And yeah, guys, thanks so much. Have a beautiful day. Get outside, get your feet in the soil, get your eyes up to the sun, get your skin exposed. As our friend Troy Casey would say, well, he takes it the next level. And he, I wanted to bring this up real quick, Matt. My friend Troy Casey went viral. I don't know if you're familiar with Troy Casey.
Yeah,
this butt chugging prana. He was doing the the butthole sun gazing, which is fascinating. But hey, man, look at that guy. He's 55 and crushing it. That just goes back to my whole thing is like, people, you may judge, but look at the effects of this stuff. It's real. It's amazing. So get outside, get sun, as Matt was saying, look into his protocol. Matt, do you have that protocol in like a blog post or somewhere people can access that?
Right now, no. We're going to be releasing it as a course that people can purchase, basically with every step, and then a video with a full description and a simple PDF guide that also explains every step that people can utilize. So that'll be available within the next few weeks on rawoptics.com under courses in our shop.
Very cool. And that's Raw as in the sun god, RA, optics.com. So check that out, guys. Hey, thanks, everybody. Have a beautiful day. We'll see you next week. And don't forget reunionsummit.com. Please go sign up. It's a free summit. Get in there. It's going to be amazing. Thanks, guys. Take care.